So good evening, everybody. Happy 38th birthday for me. I celebrate my birthday in Memphis. Have a lot of great barbecue. In a few hours, I'm going to go to the Lorraine Hotel, and then I'm also going to Graceland as well. Really, so I'm going to have a really great birthday in Memphis. But one of the other things I did for my birthday is watch AEW Collision, and definitely this is a very hit or miss show, and I really think that. AEW needs to understand the purpose of Collision. And I think that, Collision really needs to be an experimental show. So, when you have wrestlers speak on the microphone, you see who's strong, who can be somebody someday. You can kind of see who can have it or not really have it. And then you can also set up matches for pay per views because obviously, like the Toronto show and the St. Louis show, All Out and Wrestle Dream, they're not that far away really. And ultimately, too, you have to put your best foot forward with Collision because ultimately, if this show gets canceled because of low ratings, it's going to really be a huge nail in the coffin for AEW, really, because there's no way that they can do like a 2 hour dynamite with all their stars and everything like that and have no and try to have a structure. Really, it's just too much for 2 hours, really. So I just hope that they really just work hard on making Collision bigger and better. But this was really a hit or miss show. Really, there are things that move the ship, and there's things that made this episode work in a positive direction, and then there's a lot of things that didn't work. The first thing that I'm liking about AEW is whoever came up with that idea of opening promos and having everybody speak needs a fucking bonus. Like, you had the Death Rider speak, you hear stuff from Yuta and other things like that, so you can kind of see that it doesn't work with Yuta. And then the other part of it is that you cut to like Jamie Hayter and talking as well. Really, you cut to the Triangle of Madness. You kind of see who are kind of like really good talkers and other things like that. So it's good. It also hypes the audience up. It also gives people a motivation to watch really, because like I said, professional wrestling is not just matches. It is story and hype to a match that makes it work really. So when you do these opening things, it works out very well really. So you open with a trios match, the Paragon versus the Death Riders. And the big story about this is Danny Garcia and Daddy Magic. So there's something I want to say about Daddy Magic. He's highly, highly underrated as a speaker. Like that backstage promo he did when he got bloodied by MJF and he was having a mental breakdown. Like, honestly, he reminded me a lot of Joaquin Phoenix. Like, if he digs into that really, I think he'll be a really great professional wrestler. He has emotions, but it's almost like, how far does he go with this? Like, now his best friend Danny Garcia's with the Death Riders. Imagine if they had a match, or a last man standing match, or a really bloody like Cody versus Dustin type of match at Wrestle Dream. That would really, really elevate Daddy Magic. That would really elevate Danny Garcia, and I think that that's something they need to do. Like, that's definitely like, again, that's like a dish in the kitchen. That's like the peanut butter and the jelly and the bread, really. That's almost like saying, put that dish together, you're going to have something that's going to be an all-time great thing, really, So I pray that they do that. I really, really pray that they do that. But overall, really great match, because really, the Paragon were just doing extra whoopings on Danny Garcia, so I appreciate that, because that makes logical sense and everything like that, really, because, in professional wrestling, it's not just moves, whatever, it's ultimately psychology, really, so they're mad at Danny Garcia, they're going to give an extra whooping on him, and then Danny Garcia gets the pinfall on Daddy Magic, so, hopefully there's a follow-up, there's an epilogue to this, and the epilogue really should be Danny Garcia versus Daddy Magic at AEW Wrestle Dream. And the other reason why they should do this match at Wrestle Dream is you're also saying, hey, we want Danny Garcia to stand out, we want Daddy Magic to stand out, because you need to build new stars. You have a bunch of people who are not there right now, like Swerve and Ospreay. So if you can kind of have a good feud, you can have something that pops people, that's good. The other thing I want to mention before I go a little further in this video is that hologram. So what happened was that like during the promo, you saw a hologram and he got attacked, and then and then the computer screen showed the clone of hologram. They should call him Virus. As I said, that really appeals as a name, really. So what happened was it goes red, then gets attacked by Kyle Fletcher, and it's mentioned that Hologram is going to be out for over a year. So there's a couple of questions about this. That there's a couple of concerns about this. Next week they announced that it's Orange Cassidy versus Kyle Fletcher. I'm very blessed they did this because they could have done something like it could have been Kyle Fletcher versus the clone of Hologram, and that would have been a bad one because he would have to lose. The other thing that I want to say is Hologram does have some appeal. A lot of people like him. He has really great matches. So it's almost kind of like, what are you going to do next, really? And then how are you going to build the Hologram character with this guy, with this new clone of him coming, and and how are you going to have matches? Or is it going to be Hologram just with a red clone thing? The same luchador, just different stuff, really. So it kind of adds a bunch of questions. But it kind of adds, what is AEW going to do with Hologram, like, being out of this? The next match you had was Swirl, which is Blake Christian and somebody else versus the Acclaimed. And this was a really great match to kind of show that Max Caster and Anthony Bowens are not on the same page. There was some comedy stuff where Max Caster was walking away, then Anthony Bowens got fed up and walked away, then they just got the victory, and it showed that they're stronger as a unit, really. But this was also a little bad, too, because Blake Christian, they said that he's undefeated in Ring of Honor, but he's been losing nonstop in AEW, really. So it's almost like, now they lost to a team that was dysfunctional, really. So it's almost like, what do you do with Blake Christian? Is he somebody that when his contract's up, he may go to NXT and become like Ricky Starks, my boy, really, getting the NXT championship, So, it's just another reminder of, if he's always being a loser, now he's losing against the Acclaimed, really. It's like, what do you do with, what does he do with his career, really? Because he can't be on AEW losing all the time, really. But the other part of it, too, is that Right Team won because Max Caster, Anthony Bowens, they got a reaction from the crowd. There's people who are into them. So it makes sense for them to win. And then also, too, I like that they're not doing Billy Gunn anymore because that's kind of run its course, really. So, with Jerry Lynn, that could be another dynamic. That could be a good dynamic because they're a little bit more serious. Because he's like, he expects them to be a lot more serious. He expects them to kind of get their shit together. So, you don't want to have Billy Gunn because it kind of is just the same thing. Let's do it a little different. So I'm okay with Max Caster and Anthony Bowens teaming up, really. Again, I think that should happen. They are a draw. They get a lot of attention. If I was in the crowd, I'd be like shouting, "We want to rap, because we want Max Caster to get back to that." And then the next couple of matches that you had, I don't remember them that much, but they made an announcement that they had I believe the next one was Kyle. They had the Outrunners and Dalton Castle versus a bunch of jobbers. So I was not kind of happy with this match because it was a great showing of them. It was a really, really great showing of the Outrunners and Dalton Castle. I was happy with this match. Another match I wasn't happy with, but I really, really just I'm a little worried as well, really, because I think the Outrunners and Dalton Castle can be an amazing trios team, and they have a bunch of great trios teams. They have the Death Riders, they have the Conglomeration, they have Dalton Castle and the Outrunners. They also have Powerhouse. They have the Ops and they also have Shane Taylor Promotions. They have the Von Erichs. They have LFI. There's so many trios teams. So it's ultimately there is no excuse. There is no excuse for AEW to undervalue. I actually think they should do a four-way trios match at Wrestle Dream just to show the audience, a little bit about, hey, look at all these teams, look at all these people, really. And also, too, when Dalton Castle came out, he got a loud reception, really. And there's two things about Dalton Castle. He's a little bit of a controversial character because, yes, he is a metrosexual. And if I'm saying the word right, he comes off as homosexual, but he's not homosexual. And then he also has the men with him and stuff like that. So you have to be a little careful with that because I think that, you don't want to kind of make him... You don't want to make him kind of like a gay stereotype, It's almost like with Kyle Fletcher and his homoeroticism with Don Callis, They have to be careful because you don't want to kind of create like a Buck and Chuck type of thing, really. But I think that, it's working well, really. But I also think the appeal of Dalton Castle is the metrosexual stuff. But I also like that you had the boys and they don't have like this New Orleans type of thing, really. So I really think that, like I said, I think my big worry is where are you going to guys go? What are you guys going to do with them, a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now? Because I think that that's good. I also think Dalton Castle should not be in Ring of Honor anymore. He really he's graduated from that. And it's a step backwards. And if he wants to go back to Ring of Honor, he needs to be fired because he needs to kind of move forward, really. It's just like what happened to, I think, Tommaso Ciampa or a few other people in NXT who kind of were, who wanted to be there for a long time. I think what happened was Vince fired them, and they're like, because he was like, hey, it's about going upwards. It's not about being comfortable where you're at, really. I think that Dalton Castle needs a bigger audience. Dalton Castle needs to come back, do something different, really. And part of that's with being with the Outrunners and doing other good stuff, really. The next thing that happened on the show was that they had another squash match with Wheeler Yuta and Marina Shafir versus like local jobbers, really. So it was a little stupid because Marina Shafir's finishing submission is called the Mother's Milk, where she puts a woman in her chest, really, and puts them in like a hold. That's not a good finisher. That just looks a little stupid. So they need to change some stuff up with her. She probably needs to like kind of like to quote Eric Bischoff, he needs to quote John Laurinaitis, she needs to change her offensive repertoire. A Mother's Milk, that's kind of a stupid name for a movie, even. Unless you're trying to do Tony Storm and trying to do like some sexual comedy, really. But that's kind of a stupid name. Another thing that was good about this show was that you had John Callis was not there, really, and that needs to happen, really, because it's becoming a little like Conway. It's becoming like the Conway Twitty gag it's becoming like the Conway Twitty gag in Family Guy, where it's just been on like a little bit of a repeat mode. Like Conway Twitty, how in Family Guy they would always feature the Conway Twitty, like a music video of Conway Twitty just to kill time, really. Now we're getting to the fucked on Callis kind of like repeat stuff. So it's good for him not to be there every single show. It's good for like his people to come out by themselves, really. Or even if you do that for Collision, really, where, you don't have Don Callis, really, because you need to kind of get to a point where he's not always there for his members, because it just becomes a little repetitive as well, really. The next thing I want to mention is that they did this commercial where they're advertising the Florida show. So I really appreciate this to show everybody, like, okay, they're going to be in Florida, like, for, like, 4 different shows. They're going to be in Hollywood. They're going to be in Jacksonville, and I think they're going to another place like Fort Lauderdale, if I'm correct. But it was a little weird because they had Tony Schiavone in this, and then they had it look like very 1980s. So it felt a little like a little creative. I didn't like it at first. I felt it was a little stupid, but then I kind of said to myself, you know what? They're announcing a bunch of Florida shows. Why not do some? And they made that commercial, that segment, kind of stand out a little bit. It's kind of blast to the past for Florida Championship Wrestling because they used to do a lot of territory. They did territories back in the 70s and 80s. So that looked like kind of like a very territory broadcast. But if you need to stand out, you need to stand out. So that made it stand out a little bit. So I'm gonna give them points for that, really. The other thing too is that you had Nick Wayne speak, on the do a promo. He's not a good promo person. Like I said, he comes off like a high school freshman. Wheeler Yuta is not good on the microphone. He tries, and I appreciate the effort. I see that he's trying to improve, but he just looks like a clown. Maybe he needs more muscle on his body. Maybe he needs to change his look, but it just doesn't, to me. I can't take him seriously. I think the other issue is that he's very skinny ass, and he looked very skinny ass. Like, he just doesn't, in professional wrestling physics, he just looks like he looks like, a more bark than bike, really. The next match you had on the show, I know this is a little out of order, was Eddie Kingston and Hook versus Big Bill and Brian Keith. They changed it to a tornado tag team match, meaning that, two there's no tagging. It's just a brawl between two teams, really. So, again, this was kind of questionable as well, really, because you have Hook put a submission on Brian Keith, really. And I hate even saying this. I don't think Brian Keith should be employed by AEW because it's almost like, where do you go with him? He's just a loudmouth. He's kind of like, he doesn't... he doesn't have an appeal, really. There's no really appeal to Brian Keith. So you need to just have Big Bill by himself, really. I think Big Bill has a lot to offer, really. He can be a heel person. He can do big man versus big man type of match, really. But I really think that there's two things with Big Bill. I think that he needs to leave AEW to go back to WWE because I think that he has a lot of potential. He has a lot of smash talk to him. Or he needs to, quite honestly, go to TNA Wrestling if they pay him well. But I really think that, with AEW, it's one of those things, too, where he's just like the Hardy Boys, where he's just there to be there, really. He's not really there to have a direction, and I don't think that that's good. And then he can't be losing every single match. Like with Blake Christian, they lose way too much, really. So it's almost like, what do you really do with Big Bill, who has a lot of potential, who can do a lot of really great shit? What do you do from him months and months down the road? And actually, I remember when I was in Los Angeles, he and John Moxley were talking to each other. I'm not sure if they're friends. They may be co-workers, maybe friends. I'm not a psychic. I don't know really, but maybe he could join the Death Riders. You can kind of get rid of Yuta, or you can get rid of Danny Garcia, or you can have him join as an extra member because it'll make them look more formidable. I think that maybe that could be the best thing for him, is for him to join the Death Riders. The next thing that they did in the show was that they had Kyle Fletcher versus Commander. Typical Commander match where he does a bunch of high flyer stuff. Kyle Fletcher, did some great moves and great counters as well. Was a little brutal, and that's where he needs to be. But I will say that something else about that is that I think that with Kyle Fletcher, I like that I really just like what he's been doing, and he's also a really great mic person. So, so it's a really great match. This honestly could have been a pay-per-view level match. It seemed like they had a bunch of matches on the show, so they shortened it a little bit. But this could have been gone maybe an hour, and it could have been great. This could have gone 10 minutes or 5 minutes. They knew how to put this together very well. So it was a really cool match. They announced that it was Orange Cassidy versus Kyle Fletcher. I was a little mad about this because what happened was you saw Kyle Fletcher backstage, and he was smack talking and doing other shit, So I think it would have been better if you had two things. You could have had Orange Cassidy walk on screen because a lot of people like Orange Cassidy, or you could have had Kyle Fletcher grab the in-ring microphone and cut a promo, and then you have Orange Cassidy come out a little bit. And I actually think what AEW has been doing is that they have a lot of backstage promos now, because I think that what happens is that they're a little stuck. They're a little short on time, because sometimes with Collision, I think they had maybe 8 or 9 matches tonight because of squash matches and other shit, So I do think that maybe they rely on backstage segments a little too much, because it allows them to kind of cut and edit shit a little bit quicker, really. You can kind of jump into a promo, maybe cut out of the person giving the interview or whatever, really, and then just have the promo being cut, really. But I do think that they need to start having more people speaking on the in-ring microphone to actually get it over, really. The other thing about this show, and it's a criticism, but it actually really surprises me in a way, that there was a lot of tag team matches and trios matches on the show. I do not like shows where there's a lot of that, because it gets boring, it gets a little repetitive. But you had so many interesting things go on, really, and so many motivations for these wrestlers that I actually tolerated, and they're wrestlers that I liked, really. So when you had the Acclaimed, people like the Acclaimed, when you had Death Riders versus the Paragon, it makes sense because of where Daniel Garcia's head is at, and then also his relationship with Daddy Magic, because they do go back a lot. There's a lot of things that made you care about this. When you had the main event, there are things that made you care about it. So I think, that's the thing with AEW. When you care about these wrestlers, when they have a backstory and a motivation, it works very, very well. And when you don't have that, then it's like a clusterfuck, really. So after that, after like Big Bill and Brian Keith, I don't remember anything. I think they had something before the main event, if I'm correct, but I don't remember it. I will say that the main event was Jamie Hayter versus Julia Hart, and I was like saying to myself, that's just not a good match to have at the end of the show because, Jamie Hayter is not that big of a star, nor is Julia Hart. It's probably one of those things where, they want to make the women the main event, really, and there's no problem with that, but it's almost like there's a difference between having Toni Storm, Mercedes Moné, main event a show, or even Athena, like your biggest hitters. And then there's just, having like Rio and Emi Sakura and people who don't matter that much, really. Because I think the worst main event that they did, if I'm correct, was Mercedes Moné versus Emi Sakura. Because who the hell is Emi Sakura? Most people don't know who the fuck she is. And you're putting that on U.S. television. If this was a Japan show, works, but U.S. television, no. Because most people don't know who the hell Emi Sakura is. But they announced after that match that there's going to be a women's blood and guts match. And as I said, I did a prior video about this, but I'm very concerned because, like I've said before, and I say it again, that should happen on a pay-per-view. That should happen at Chief Hits in St. Louis. That needs to happen at Wrestle Dream. And if it doesn't happen, if it does not happen at Wrestle Dream, they do not know shit, son. Because you cannot have matches like that on free television because they have to censor the violence. The other issue with that is also as well, their women's division is not that good because they did a lot with Mercedes holding all these titles, really, and they did a lot with Toni Storm, really. So they kind of did Toni Storm and Mercedes have been monopolizing the division, and then also because now you took the title off of Toni Storm, and now you're giving it to Chris Statlander, there may be a thing where Mercedes may end up with that, and she could be Mercedes 10 belts, like kind of a really good even number, and even number and a kind of like a prestigious number as well, really. So you can have Mercedes 10 belts, and then the other problem with that is when you put so much attention on Mercedes when she's holding all the titles, when Athena's in Ring of Honor and she's not being graduated to the roster, and she's been champion for over 1,000 days, it's almost like you need to kind of build a lot more women on your roster. You need to make your women stand out. I remember what I said. The way for AEW to beat WWE is to learn what they're doing in NXT. And in NXT, they're building new stars. They're setting up their future. They're looking at people and they're seeing what they can do. Really, for example, like Ricky Starks can talk on the microphone. Ricky Starks can go. Ricky Starks is my boy, really. So they learn with Ricky Starks, really. Okay, now he's somebody that can actually go for a couple of years. So do something with your blood and guts, really. Build it towards the pay-per-view. Have these women talk about what it means to have the first women's blood and guts. Talk about what a victory means. Talk about saying something like, hey, you know what? I know that Mercedes is going to be watching this match. I know Toni Storm is going to be watching this match. I know that, definitely it's going to help my career because if we win, some of us are in tag teams, so it makes our tag team look stronger and all that stuff, or things. Or one of them could be like, or you're going to have blood and guts and you have one of those women cut a promo and be like, hey, I'm coming after Mercedes. Like, she acts like this the whole division, and yeah, she runs all the shit, really, and we're not going to do that, really, anymore. It's going to be about all of us, So, I put in the blood, sweat, and tears, and blood and guts. What's Mercedes done but look like a pretty girl, with her rip-off Lady Gaga ass, fashion and whatever, really. So this blood and guts thing can, kind of be a booster shot for the women's division, and then also, too, the big thing about this blood and guts match is have all the women that you can, really. I like that they're having Queen Aminata, Tekla, Julia Hart, Sky Blue, Jamie Hayter, and they're probably going to get like 2 other women in this. They're going to get a few other women in this as well, really. If you put Toni Storm in this, I have no problem with that as well, really, because you need to have maybe somebody who's very, very over to help, as long as she doesn't kind of monopolize it. But they really need to do this, and they really need to kind of build up every woman, especially the women that have not been built up before in this match, because that could be something. I think they should have Bozilla, or they should hire Bozilla. They can even have Nyla Rose in this. Like they should really just think about what 10 women are you going to put in this match? What 10 women are you going to build to be your next generation? Because it can't just be Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné and Athena over in Ring of Honor. And then the other part of this, as well, really, is, you can do a lot of really great stuff, really. Like, think about the Elimination Chamber. Think about the Royal Rumble. Like, what do those things accomplish? Those things are to foreshadow future feuds. Those things are supposed to foreshadow matches to future WrestleManias. Those things are supposed to set up your next generation of wrestlers, because every year you need a new generation of wrestlers, and what that necessarily means is people you're going to push towards the title or whatever, really. The goal needs to be selling out Wembley Stadium. The goal needs to be, at least 70,000 or more people at Wembley Stadium next year. And this is what you do, really. You have to build new stars. You have to have matches and compelling shit that builds new stars, really. So I really think a very positive direction for the show, because with this Blood and Guts, that's what everybody wants, really. I'm very, very mad that they didn't add any matches to Wrestle Dream. That was a failure of the show. But if they have the Women's Blood and Guts match on the show, at Wrestle Dream, then this show was like an A+, really. So overall, 50-50 show. Collision needs to build matches to pay-per-views. Collision needs to give other people chances to speak. It needs to have compelling matches. And it needs to build more characters and stars, have more people speak and stuff like that, really. It's evidential to me that they can use Collision to further build the women's division, to build the trios division, build the tag team division, give other people time to talk and speak, really. So like I said, there's a lot that it can offer, really. There's a lot that it can offer, and as long as you're building to the right matches at the pay-per-view, is fine, really. So at the pay-per-view, they can add these matches from the show. They can have Darby out. They can have Danny Garcia versus Daddy Magic. They can have Women's Blood and Guts. They can have a Fatal 4-Way Trios match to introduce the audience to all the Trios teams, to kind of, build that division, and then maybe in future shows you just don't do that. But I think they need to reestablish the Trios division as well, really. You can also say to yourself that I think that they need to have a tag team tournament, because there's so many tag teams right now, just to give it some structure. And they really need to be starting to build Mark Briscoe versus Kyle Fletcher at All In. At Wrestle Dream, really. So I really think that, as I said, there's a potential for great matches. There's a potential to have stories and motivations leading to really great matches at the show, really. So hopefully they pull things together, really. Like they have a couple good weeks. They know that the next week's their anniversary show, so they have to kind of make a bunch of compelling shit for their show. Like AEW has really great pay-per-views, but like I said before, it's equals MC squared. It's professional wrestling is great when it's story, motivation, and great matches. So hopefully they pull it together, really. And this show is ultimately like they pulled a lot of things together, but are they going to continue that momentum? Every show matters, because WWE can easily do a PLE that weekend and try and mess things up, really. Always hit harder, always hit strong. Keep building that momentum. As I said, the way for AEW to survive, the way for AEW to fight WWE is restructuring, keep building your divisions, make everything strong, give people more time to speak, have them speak in the microphone a lot more, and other things like that. They're doing a lot of really great stuff, and I really, really appreciate it, and they need to just keep hitting it strong.